The views and opinions expressed by the guests, callers, and hosts on this and all Rense Radio Network programs do not necessarily reflect or agree with those of the network, its commercial sponsors, its radio station affiliates, or internet broadcast platforms. In these controversial times, we believe the First Amendment and freedom of the press are absolutely essential to the survival of our nation. Thank you. And now, enjoy the program.
Okay, and welcome back. It's Monday. Glad you're along tonight. I hope you had a good weekend. It sure went fast. It seems like it's Tuesday. I don't know why, but it does. I've been doing this program a long time, and I have met over the years, through radio, as close as I get to meeting people, some extraordinary folks. And along that trail, along that pathway, over the years, I have met and spoken to and interviewed people who claim extraterrestrial contact and claim that they have been charged with spreading the word, so to speak. Others have done work involving them, or where they have wittingly or otherwise come into contact with apparent extraterrestrials, ETs, who are down here and they look just like us, talk like us, but they're not us. And those people are especially fascinating. We have a program for the first 2 hours tonight that is going to be really amazing. Our special guest is William Tompkins. And before I get to introducing Bill, I want you to look under his name and look at his book cover and look at the models. There's a story there about his models, and it's a wonderfully well-done story. He started building models, I believe, at the age of 9. I think he was less than 10. This is really a remarkable story. I'm going to let you make up your mind like we always do here. The book is entitled Selected by Extraterrestrials: My Life in the Top Secret World of UFOs, Think Tanks, and Nordic Secretaries. Now, these aren't secretaries from Norway or Sweden or Finland. These are Nordic secretaries, as in the tall blondes, as we sometimes call them. Those ETs who look just like us, but who, in virtually every case, are described as being absolutely perfect in appearance, in manner, and especially the females, extraordinarily good-looking and attractive. Now, we're going to find out much more about this as we talk to William Tompkins during the program. But working with Bill for years, and a man who knows him extremely well and who edited the book, is Dr. Robert Wood. Now, Dr. Robert Wood has been on this program before, and the interesting thing about Bob Wood is that he was with McDonnell Douglas Missiles and Space Corporation, Douglas Aircraft Company, however you want to call it, for many years, working on secret projects, and I mean top secret projects. And his connection with Bill Tompkins, we're going to find out about shortly. The odd thing about Dr. Bob Wood and yours truly is that my father was the public relations director of McDonnell Douglas Missiles and Space for years, and used to fly to the Cape for every launch involving a McDonnell Douglas or Douglas product, would drive up to Vandenberg for the same thing, and told me some pretty amazing stories. And I'm not saying that he and Bob knew each other. Hi, Bob. Hi, Art. But they were working together at the same place at the same time. And as director of public relations, my father had to know a lot of things that he would never tell me, and didn't. But I could tell from our conversations that he was involved in some very interesting work. Now, let me first, if I may, bring on Dr. Bob Wood. Are you there, Bob?
I am indeed.
Thank you for being here, and I really appreciate it, and it's great to talk to you again. I only wish my dad and you had become friends. That would have been fun.
Yeah, it would have been.
With the introduction of Dr. Robert Wood, let me now welcome to the program William Tompkins. Hello, Bill. Thank you for being here, and welcome.
Well, I'm a pleasure.
You are an extraordinary man by any measure. You have had a life that would be the envy, if not the fascination, of anyone who were to read the book, Selected by Extraterrestrials. Is this... Now, I understand there's another book in the works. Am I right?
That's correct, yes.
How many do you think you're going to end up doing?
4.
Well,
we're going to have 4 books, and it's going to go into more strange things that happened after Douglas and TRW, and it's very, very interesting.
Now, TRW, for folks who don't know, was, I remember from my father, Thompson Ramo Wooldridge, big corporation, aerospace, and all of that. But let me ask Bob, what is your relationship with Bill Tompkins, Bob? When did it start?
Well, it started about 2009 when he told me on the phone some amazing things. So I went down to see him. It turns out my daughter lives in Oceanside, and he did too at that time. Mm-hmm. And we spent 2 hours, and he was telling me his life story. It was so unbelievable that I felt I had to dig deeper, and he started to give me some written descriptions of what he wanted to say, and together I kind of pieced it with more perfect English, and got it edited. Bob didn't believe a word.
What's that, Bill?
Bob didn't believe a word. Go ahead.
That's funny. Todd, I need double the volume if you would please turn my volume up. Thank you. Didn't believe it. You know, it was so unbelievable you couldn't let it go, Bob.
That's right. But the thing that really hooked me was that he and I worked at, as you said, at Douglas Aircraft at the same time, at the same place, and knew some of the same people. We even worked for some of the same people, even though we didn't know it. Yeah,
just like my dad worked, and you didn't know him. I think you may have seen him, but he was a very public figure with the company,
right,
at the time. I used to hear stories about him going down to the Cape and talking to Von Braun and just remarkable stuff. I remember the name Kurt Debus, and we've had Clark McClellan on the program many times, and he knew all these people. They were Germans, and the Germans at that time were the driving force behind the entire United States space program.
Kurt Debus is featured in Selected by Extraterrestrials by Bill.
Ah, well, we'll find out probably more in this book about Kurt Debus, D-E-B-U-S, than anywhere else. And that's fascinating. I really want to read this if I just had the time, but I need the book first. So I got to get a copy of this book. I would urge all of you, and again, I have not read the book, but knowing Bob Wood as I do, and I can't wait to hear Bill Tompkins tell this story. Now, Bill, you have what I guess we can legitimately call a damn near totally photographic memory, because when you were building models of U.S. Navy ships, that was kind of a no-no. You weren't supposed to take pictures of them. You weren't, because this is, getting ready for wartime and in the war. Tell us how you got started with model building, which all of you again can see if you look under William Tompkins and take that link and go look at that page and look at the incredible detail of these models. When did you start, and what got you going?
Well, actually, it was like you said, very early, 9 years old, and I lived in Hollywood, and my dad had an office down on Wilshire Boulevard, and he took us down to Long Beach, and we got to ride out on the Navy ships that were powered out there, the lifeboats that were powered, and we go aboard cruisers and destroyers and aircraft carriers because they were tied up in the Long Beach harbor.
What year would this have been, Bill, approximately?
In the 37, 36 time period.
In the 30s.
And it was interesting because sometimes on a windy day you would go out in that open boat and with a lot of people, and then you have to climb off on the side of the aircraft carrier, and this particular one was the Lexington. And it's a massive ship. It's unbelievable in its size, 800 foot long, and covered on the side, so you have to climb up a long ladder. The wind's blowing, and the water splashing up on you as you climb up the ladder. And then getting on board, it's like a young kid's unbelievable experience to be in that hangar.
Disneyland times 10, I'm sure.
Absolutely, unbelievable.
Yeah. Now you were out on public tours of the Navy boats. This big ship, this aircraft carrier. You went up there, and it sounds like it kind of changed your life. Just going on that boat.
Yes, it did completely. And at the time, cameras were forbidden. Nobody could carry a camera. And I needed detail of the radars and that sort of thing for my models. And so I would walk the flight deck and walk the shadow on the flight deck of the radar. And then I took a piece of paper and I marked it down in this little tablet, and I had that size now. I knew how many feet it was, and its length and its width.
Wow.
And then I walked up to the bow of the ship where the secret steam catapults were, and I walked them, and I marked them down. So then I put those on the ship from the models.
You could have sold that to the Japanese. But we don't go there. We don't go there. This is before the war, folks, and there were a lot of people in the military then who knew a war was coming or suspected it, and so there was certainly a secrecy about this that we're trying to describe here. But here's a 9-year-old kid, so smart and so driven by the detail that he wanted for it. He was going to go build a model of this thing so he could continue to enjoy the awe of what he was experiencing, and he walked it and wrote it down and knew. Now this would be classified information, period. All right, and yet here he was at 9, literally taking mental pictures of this and writing down steps equaling feet, which would give him the distance and the length and the width and so forth of these radars. Now, radar in the 30s was a very new thing, very new. What did the Navy tell you about the Lexington when you were on it? How did the tour guide handle it? You remember?
Well, I managed to step away from the tour guide.
You sneak. I figured you did.
And because really there's a lot of other things. There were very advanced firing systems that they had for their new 40 calibers and and the 5-inch anti-aircraft guns. And nobody knew this, and it is a unit to put on the top of the 5-inch guns. So I'm walking over to those, and this particular carrier had 6 in the front and 6 in the back, of the ship. And so I go down to these little decks, and I walk the length of this, and I make my marks, and then I make the drawing, a little perspective drawing. And when I drove home, I would clean up my perspective drawings, and then the next day I would make a more detailed drawing of that. And, of course, I got straight A's in junior high school later when I did drafting.
Oh, I'll bet. This is really fascinating. Briefly, what did your folks think of your amazing talent and gift for this at that young of an age, and your interest more than that?
Well, they were interested, but they sort of expected it. And so there wasn't much there, except that my dad got in trouble. And the models got about 30 of them. I ended up with some 50 models before I went in the Navy. And so we put these in the Broadway department store in Hollywood Boulevard in the window. And so some Navy guy saw it, contacted Naval Intelligence, and they came out to my dad's office over on Wilshire Boulevard and sort of arrested him. And they kept him for 2 days and 2 nights. No
kidding. They wanted to know how in the hell this information came into his family's possession, right?
Yes.
And he said, my son did it. He's 9. And they said, sure.
Yeah. So they came out to our small apartment, and I shared an apartment with my older brother, and I had hundreds of documents and drawings and photographs and newspaper articles piled up halfway to the ceiling. So when they went through this, and it ended up that my dad got out of jail, and we were then into a position where the Navy sort of put together a program for me.
So, okay, they didn't accuse you of being a Japanese spy. They could tell you weren't. They must have been mind-blown at what you had created, though. They must have been stunned. Did they show any shock?
Yes, they did. And my dad had the models down at the Los Angeles County Museum, and they showed those people, and they had put articles in the newspaper about the models and said that they were the finest of the type that they'd ever seen.
Yeah, and where's the Naval Intelligence office at this time? How could they miss all this? That's funny. Well, in the newspaper and everything.
Yeah, but anyway, a lieutenant in intelligence in his office down in San Pedro, where they had a Navy facility.
Right.
My dad had to drive me down there, and we had long conversations, several days, and they decided to put me in the Navy.
Okay,
so by this time,
they decided to put you in the Navy at you're basically not even a teenager yet.
Well, actually, I sort of am because I'm in first year of high school by this time.
Okay, I got it. All right. So you're 13, 14 or something like that.
Yeah, and they pulled me out of Hollywood High School, and they put me temporarily in the Vultee Aircraft Company over in Downey, which was a secret facility, while they were checking my secret, or my information about me for their secret clearance.
So you had to go through. Yeah, I got it. Okay. Vultee, Vultee. That's a name that isn't known by many people. I remember I liked models too of the Navy fighters and the Navy planes, and when I was a little kid, and I remember the name Vultee. But tell us what they did with you. What was your assignment? You're just a kid. You're 13, 14, a freshman in high school, going to Hollywood High School, really the world's most famous high school when you think about it, even back, especially in the 30s, I guess. What did they do with you?
Well, they put me into a machine, which is a riveting machine, for a week and a half. And then they took me out of there into a secret area where they were building a very advanced Navy fighter, a futuristic fighter. And I worked in there by helping out in all different kinds of ways. They would ask me stuff, and I would come up with suggestions, and it was kind of weird. And when my clearance was finally established that I was who I was, they put me in the Navy. I went through boot camp right here in San Diego, and instead of going to the sea or to training, they sent me over to North Island, Naval Air Station.
That's in San Diego.
This is in San Diego. And they made me sit in an office for 2 days, and I didn't talk to anybody. And
you're still a young, you're still a kid. This is when you're what, 15?
Well, I'm 17. And,
so you're okay.
Yeah, and so there was some cute girls actually in the office there, and the fact that it was in the engineering building where they do engineering on reconstruction of airplanes, almost like a factory.
Okay.
And so then this commander comes over, and he looks at me, and I didn't have my shoes polished, and I guess my uniform wasn't what it should have been. And he looked at me, and then he didn't say anything. He just mentioned to me to follow him. So I followed him into another office, and he showed me some things, and he gave me a couple of documents, and he said, "You're going to take over." And
you're going to take over.
And he left that day for Pacific Fleet. And so here I am, a third-class seaman, kid, and I replaced the Navy commander.
Oh, my. And what was your duty? What did they have you assigned to do? You're going to take over. You're going to take over what, Bill?
Well, that's... Bob has a copy of it, and my mission statement is absolutely unreal. I think Bob could say it better.
You want to talk? Yeah, I was going to go back to Bob. Bob, do you want to brief us on this? I'm not sure that Bill may still be under a national security pledge of some kind, and
he doesn't think he is. But,
okay.
I'm looking for the exact wording of the responsibilities that he was given. And
yeah, this is a remarkable story. He replaced a commander at North Island Naval Air Station before the war.
But his responsibility was actually authorized. The previous commander's responsibility was authorized by Forrestal himself, and that's why it's so unusual.
Forrestal, for our listeners, James Forrestal was a legend, and is a legend in naval history. During the war, after the war, he was the first Secretary of Defense we had, I believe. That was the title of it, and died under extremely bizarre circumstances in Washington, D.C. They had allegedly forced him into Bethesda Hospital, and for some strange reason, this perfectly fine man threw himself out of his hospital window and killed himself. No one with a brain believes that story, but that's another time. We'll get to that. So Forrestal was aware of Bill and assigned him to they thought he was clearly a genius of some kind.
Well, the wording for the assignment was actually written. The one I have in the book is written in 1945, and it does identify Bill Tompkins. But this assignment was the same as the previous guy. It says mission under the direction of the production superintendent. In addition to reporting directly to the production superintendent, the disseminator of aircraft research and information shall also report to the planning division superintendent and to the chief engineer to coordinate compile and maintain a continuous survey of research and information relative to special equipment necessary in the repair and overhaul, experimental tests, and development work of aircraft engines, and their accessories. It's very general. This is dated 26 September 1945. Statement of mission, tasks, and objectives. Disseminator of Aircraft Research and Information, Planning Division, William M. Tompkins, USNR, is specifically mentioned in this document.
Okay, wow. And you're about 17 years old, Bill, is that right?
Yes. The situation was that I had these three captains that I was sort of, they were my bosses. And but then there was the admiral of the base, Admiral Rick Labata. And Rick Labata was a individual that had two hats, like many people in the Navy.
Right.
One hat was the commander of the Naval Air Station in San Diego, which was a very large naval base. We had hundreds of aircraft coming and going.
Yeah.
And his hobby was above naval intelligence.
His hobby was above naval intelligence. All right, go ahead.
The use of the word hobby in the Navy in that area is where you get stuck with all kinds of other stuff besides what you're supposed to do.
Uh-huh.
But his main mission was to. He had 27 Navy spies, operatives, and they were in Germany, and these fellows would come back, and his aide would wake me up at night, only at 12 o'clock. And I'd get dressed, and he'd escort me over to the offices, this secret office conference room in the Admiral's area.
All right.
And there would be, this is interesting, there would be, the Admiral would be on my left, I'd be next to him. On the right would be at least one of the captains, and on the other side of the table facing us would be one of his naval operatives that just got back from stealing stuff from the SS in Germany.
Now, this is 1945, so the war...
No, this is 42.
42. The war is just at its height, really. So this is remarkable. What was your rank? What did they give you as a rank then?
I was a third-class seaman.
This must have knocked people over. Here's this young kid, 1942, third-class seaman, sitting next to the admiral in a room. All right, I get the picture. This is extraordinary. You're like almost a top-secret weapon. Go ahead.
It's not just extraordinary. This is unbelievable because these people, these Navy operatives, have been working, bringing information back of an agreement with reptilians to between Hitler and the reptilians.
Now wait, hold on, Bill. This is, I don't want anyone to be left behind. This is 1942. The war is at its height.
Yes, sir.
There's still a chance Germany could win. It's not over. Stalingrad and all that, you know, they were at the top, the pinnacle, basically. And you're telling me that in 1942, you were privy in a room of 4 or 5 people to the most secret intelligence data of Germany's relationship with an off-planet species we call the reptilians during the war. Now,
yes, sir.
Did this? How did you take that?
It was taken very easily for me. And let me back off for just a minute.
Sure.
When I was doing the models, I also was tremendously interested in extraterrestrial. And there wasn't any extraterrestrial. There
Not
was
back
just,
then. No.
Just in the newspapers, okay?
No, there was, Flash Gordon, a few science
Flash
fiction
Gordon,
newspapers?
That's it. So my dad took me and my brother up to Mount Wilson Observatory several times. And when I was up there, we got to meet a number of the astronomers, and they were explaining everything that was going on out in space. And they talked about galaxies and that there's no life out there and all this other thing. And while I'm there, before I even leave, I know they're wrong. I know that I can see in my mind other civilizations. I know this sounds ridiculous.
No, it doesn't. No, not at all.
And so when this went on, I went over to Caltech places and talked to different people there. And my own mind, I knew that when the U.S. Navy Akron and Macon dirigibles in 1935 flew over Hollywood, okay?
Right.
Now, that to me was, I ran out of the class. I'm in school. I ran out of the classroom because I could hear the roar again, which I knew. I knew that roar. And then they flew very slow over Hollywood.
These are blimps, dirigibles.
These are dirigibles that are 800-foot-long dirigibles. They have a hangar deck inside. They're U.S. Navy, and they are a spacecraft carrier.
All right, hold on. A hangar deck inside. Now that's for something to land, obviously.
Yeah.
But they don't come in and land like on a runway, correct?
No, it's a dirigible, a massive dirigible. The Germans have built a lot of those back then.
Yeah, the Zeppelins and all, yes.
The U.S. Navies were the largest. They were the largest on the planet, except finally the Hindenburg.
All right. Okay, so you knew the sound of the engines. You ran out of the classroom to look up at this thing.
And they would be... some of the airplanes would be flying next to it, and then they go down and they hook onto the hook, and they demonstrate. And,
I know what you're talking about now. They were little biplanes, and they were attached to the dirigible. One of them crashed off San Francisco, and they found it a few years ago, and the little planes were still in the wreckage of the dirigible. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about.
That's correct.
All right, so this is fascinating. They would actually fly under the blimp, folks, and there would be a hook, and the plane would hook, I assume, above the wing on this hook, and they would winch the plane up inside and store it, and the pilot would get out. Nobody knows we had this kind of technology. This is extraordinary. What this is a flying aircraft carrier.
Yes.
All right. So, now I want to do one other quick thing. In 1942, it says here, you had qualified and you were a pilot?
Yes. So
you were go ahead.
Okay. The admiral, he was actually a very sweet guy.
Yeah.
But he had two airplanes. One he had a Lockheed twin engine, and then he had a single engine high wing airplane, 7-passenger. And for local flights, he used that on the West Coast, and then he used the big Lockheed to go back east. So one of my tasks was to take the documents which we put together for the information that the Navy spy gave us.
Yes.
And take it to different companies, like take it to Caltech or take it to Lockheed or take it to Douglas.
Okay, and now the spy is telling you that the Germans are in contact with an off-planet race of beings that you will call the reptilians here. Now, did you take that kind of information to Caltech and some of these other companies, obviously at their highest levels of secrecy? Was that information spread around?
This is the first time the information was spread into United States secret areas.
Wow. All right. Bill, would you hold on a minute? I've got to take a break. It'll just be a couple minutes. We'll come right back. Now, this is all covered in the book, edited by Dr. Bob Wood, about William Mills Tompkins' astonishing life. It's called Selected by Extraterrestrials. And we'll be right back. Okay, welcome back with Dr. Ed Wood and Bill Tompkins. This is, what a story, what a book. This is a must-read, you can tell already. And I bet you that no more than a few percent of the people out there knew that we had flying aircraft carriers, which is what these were, in the early 40s. Now, you took this information about extraterrestrial contact that had been made by the Germans somehow. They had obviously been contacted by the reptilians and were giving them some kind of aid. Is that what the spies were finding out? What did they find out, Bill?
Well, actually, there was a young girl, again, a young blonde girl, in Europe in 1890. Who was contacted by what we'll talk about later, the Nordics.
Okay.
And she was told to design a propulsion system and design a space vehicle large enough for her family and leave the planet and go live on another star's planet where it would be safer.
She was told to design a ship to take her family with a propulsion system to take her to another solar system in the galaxy, I assume.
Yes.
Now,
right.
This is in the 1890s. All right. Yes. Go ahead. This is getting wild.
Okay.
Yeah.
So she then was involved with the Germans.
Right.
And finally, the girl ended up with some 1,400 people in that part of Europe, all doing the same thing. They all got the message. She sort of structured and organized it, got people together, and many top engineers and scientists in that area got the same message, and they were starting to design and build large
spaceships.
UFOs.
Yeah.
Spaceships.
Okay, now was this something that the German government knew about going in? I guess they found out about it pretty early on. Yes?
Yes, and so the SS got into it, and they grabbed everything. They got all of these people, and they didn't take it away from them, but they paralleled that 1,400 group people effort, and then started to build the propulsion systems for large and small UFOs. And so Hitler then put together a program which was based on his agreement with the reptilians. Now, it's very important that people understand that young girl and most of the other people working with her were being influenced by Nordic people, who were essentially the good guys.
Okay.
The reptilians are extremely bad people, and Hitler got with them. So here are two programs going to build large numbers of UFOs, and of course, Germany wanted to use them to kill off everybody on the planet here. And so,
well, they were being bombed to smithereens, you bet. I'm sure they would have wanted that technology, yeah.
And so even anti-gravitational propulsion was being used.
Now, you've heard of Die Glocke, yes? That's the bell, the Nazi bell, so-called.
Yes.
All right,
yes.
this is an outgrowth of this program, I would assume.
Yes, it is.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, Admiral Rigobata had these young fellas, and we would get at least one of them every other week. And then they would go back and go to a different area, and they'd find other information that was going on.
So they would go back to Germany, and penetrate these groups somehow, and that's where they were getting their data.
Yes, and this went on for 4 years.
Oh, my.
So after we wrote down and documented what each one of these individuals gave us, information-wise, we would put together packages. And then I'm back to me being a pilot. The Admiral's 7-passenger airplane,
right?
I used that to fly to Lockheed or fly to Caltech,
right.
Or fly to other areas on the West Coast. And his pilot, after a while, he said, Bill, you take it. So I'd fly it, and then finally he said, well, why don't you try and land it? And so then I landed it. And so after
a while...
No kidding.
Bill, you had a mental, intuitive understanding of aerodynamics and flight, and you just knew how to do it. You didn't have to go through school. You had the talent. You had, and this is not unusual for a genius. You had it. Okay. Something gave it to you. It was there. They knew it. They recognized you. I mean, if Forrestal is involved in your appointment, they knew what they had. They had something astonishing in you. Go ahead, please.
Somebody must have known something. And but it's interesting that these packages that we put together, we get it together, and then I use the Admiral's attaché case, which is a double one with double locks. And I take that out in the morning and put it on the airplane, and we take off and head to different places.
Who would be with you usually, Bill? Who would be with you?
Most of those were just the pilot and myself.
Okay.
Sometimes we would have a guy that was had to go to an area similar to that, and we'd pick it up. But it was very seldom.
Well, this information you had was so far above top secret, it's off the scale. Just astonishing that you're doing this. I'm all ears. Bob, do you want to say anything at this point, Dr. Bob Wood?
Well, I'd like to add that the German technology, in my judgment, was later used in some of the work that he did in the think tank at Douglas, because one of the people there, the key person, Dr. Klemper, came from Germany in 1935, and in my judgment, he had a document that was classified. I have the unclassified version, but he had a document that was classified that undoubtedly contained some of the technology associated with making these craft work.
Now this, the last time you mentioned your awe about what you were hearing when you went and sat down with Bill and his story. How long did it take you to get to a point that you realized this was the real deal and you wanted to help get this story out and you ended up editing the book? How many visits with Bill did it take?
I'd say about 3, because after the third visit, I got the confirmation of the fact that we had so many common interactions at Douglas Aircraft, and there was no way that, I mean, everything that he said about that time there was exactly what I remembered, down to the individual names and their attitudes, and so well, plus, after you talk to people for many hours, you get a feeling for their integrity, and I've concluded that Bill absolutely believes that what he's telling you now is the exact truth as he remembers it, as best as he can.
Very good. Okay. All right. Bill, let's get back to the story now. You're flying this data around to Caltech in 1942, 3, 4. Yeah. What was their reaction to it?
Okay. Okay. Actually, when I say Caltech, everybody says Pasadena. So, but I didn't go to Pasadena. The pilots and I, me flying, I go to the China Lake. Weapons Center.
Yeah.
On the desert, which is east of the Air Force facility out on the desert. And so my package to Caltech did not go to Caltech first. It went to the Caltech group working on a dozen different programs underground in this massive naval facility out there at China Lake.
So they had the legendary China Lake underground research facility in the 40s. This has been there. God only knows what's out there now. Wow. And you got to go down in there. This is astonishing.
So my part of my position was I would bring the data. I would sit down to whoever it was that had been assigned that I should see.
Yes.
And I then would explain the project and the documentation, not just how we were acquiring it, but how we thought it was an area that they could best accomplish this. And so then I would fly back again to the same people dozens of times with additional information as it came in to that particular area's studies.
So they were rotating these spies in one a week, approximately. Was that what you said?
Yes.
And these briefings must have been extraordinary. Were the spies able to bring in paper data, or were they mostly reporting just verbally?
It was almost 50-50. But, of course, they had real problems with cameras.
Yeah. Sure.
So we didn't get good pictures. But one of the flights that I made, or I shouldn't say one because I did it several times, was to Douglas El Segundo plant and to the Douglas Santa Monica plant.
Right.
So at that time, they didn't have the big wooden hangar Bob and I were at. It was built later on. But I gave a full package to a group of engineers that were tied up into a classified area inside of Douglas area.
Okay.
I took the package in, and I said, I don't know these people, but that's where I'm supposed to go. So I take this whole package, and it's made up of sometimes 15 different areas, and I gave this to those people. Now, Bob is going to tell you who those people were.
Okay.
Let him tell you.
All right, we will. Bob, we have to pause for the top of the hour break here. We'll come right back as soon as we can. So take a few minutes, get a drink of water, whatever, and we'll be back to continue with hour 2. This book is obviously one of the most fascinating you will ever read. It's called Selected by Extraterrestrials, the story of William Mills Tompkins. Okay? Remember that. You can order it. Just look under Bill's name in the guest section at Rense, and the Amazon link is right there. All right, we will continue with more after the top of the hour, and we will hear more fascinating things, I'm sure. This is an amazing story, and it is just the tip of the iceberg. We may have to have these gentlemen back on again, if they would be so kind, and continue this. You can read all of it in extraordinary detail in the book Selected by Extraterrestrials by William Mills Tompkins, edited by Dr. Bob Wood. Okay, Bob, right before the break, Bill said you wanted to name some names of some of these folks.
Well, yeah, I think one of the things that Bill had particularly important was the work that he did in 1952 to 1958 when he was working in a think tank at Douglas Aircraft. Right. And at that time, he was working for two guys I personally knew and worked for. One of them was Wolfgang Klemper, whose name was Klemp. Another was Elmer Wheaton, who was a vice president. And they ran this think tank, and what they were doing was they were working on a Navy program for dealing with reverse engineering alien spaceships. And
which we had at that time acquired several of, I guess.
They were working with Bobby Ray Inman, for example, was a young guy who just assigned to help this team get on. And one of the things that really impressed me was that Bill has fortunately saved some of the documents that he had, one of which was an original drawing of a 2-kilometer-long spaceship that he personally drew.
A 2-kilometer-long spacecraft.
For the Navy that he personally drew, dated 1954.
1954. This is amazing. This is about the time that Eisenhower was rumored to have had a meeting with one group, a very tall, thin group, at Edwards Air Force Base. There was a lot going on in the 50s, folks, and where there's smoke, there's fire. The idea of a 2-kilometer-long spacecraft in 1954 is mind-boggling. That suggests, of course, that we had to have had the ability to take people and material into space. This would be constructed in zero-G in space. It would have to be. You can't build something that big and blast it off from here without somebody seeing it.
Well, all I know for sure in 1954 is that there was a drawing. I don't know whether it was built or when it was built.
Yeah, I understand, but I mean, if they built anything. Now, I want to say one other thing. For those of you who don't know, it's not the United States Air Force. It's the Navy that is in space. It's the Navy that has been behind all of this stuff.
Exactly.
You have to keep that in mind. ONI, something you'll hear on this program often, Office of Naval Intelligence. The United States Navy views space as another ocean. That's their territory. They basically own it. It's their proprietary medium. Okay. Anything else, Bill? Then we'll go right back. Bob, we'll go back to Bill.
Well, there was one little thing I think Bill would want to cover, and that was the Battle of L.A. 1942, February 25th.
Yeah, I did want to make sure we got to that because it's. I've spent a lot of time on that on this program, published a lot of material about it on my site. Talked to a woman who was an air raid warden in Culver City, got a call, and was told to get her hat on and get busy. And she said, well, what's the problem? And she was told to go outside and look up. And she did. And she saw it. It was right over her head.
Yeah, Bill did too.
Oh, please tell me, Bill. Battle of L.A., 1942, extraterrestrials over Los Angeles. Most people were told it was Japanese, but it wasn't. Tell us what you know, Bill, what you saw.
Well, actually, we were living in Long Beach at that time, and around 7 o'clock, my brother and I were reading the newspaper on the floor. My dad called us and told us to come out onto the deck. We were on the second floor of a very large house that was broken up into 4 apartments. And so they had a big deck way up. And we were 4 blocks from the ocean. So we couldn't see the water, but we could see the area above it, and here was this bright light. And all 3 of us were looking at it. We called some of the neighbors, and they came out on their deck. We all looked at it, And while we were watching it for several minutes, a tiny beam came out of it at about a 45-degree angle to the left and went down towards the ocean. That beam then flipped up directly towards our apartment. Hit the back of the apartment, hit the trees, lit up everything around us, and went out.
Somebody knew you were watching. That's wild. That didn't just happen.
It was weird.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
So,
Was this Bill? Excuse me. Was this before or after the anti-aircraft had unloaded? Was it 4,000 rounds or something at this object, or is this a second object? What do you think?
No, this was before, because later in the evening the anti-aircraft started firing.
Okay.
And incidentally, what has not been published is the number of U.S. Navy anti-aircraft guns. We had the whole fleet at that time, and they used up all of their 20 millimeter, 40 millimeter, and 5-inch guns.
Firing out of where were they anchored? L.A. Harbor?
No,
Long Beach?
They were in Long Beach Harbor.
And they were shooting at this? Wow. Nobody talks about that.
The Coast Artillery was firing at them. And, of course, searchlights, we had 8 searchlights on this one big one that came in and it parked. And it was there for over an hour.
Right, yeah.
Different ones came above it, came beside it, came underneath it. The searchlights would pull off of the big one and follow the smaller ones and try to shoot them down. And it continued, but finally it got boring, so we went back to bed around 3.
I have never heard this before. That's fascinating. Go ahead.
Our neighbors stayed the whole night, and they said that it really didn't stop till around almost 5 o'clock. But the next day, there was articles in the paper that they thought there had been some military aircraft coming in. It was just a cover-up.
Sure, of course.
But my dad was like your friend. He was the guy that was responsible for that area. And, of course, he talked to everybody. And the interesting thing to me was that nobody got excited. Nobody got upset. There weren't any heart attacks. And while this was going on, over in London, Germany was bombing London. And those people were trying to get underneath the ground so they didn't get killed.
Mm-hmm.
And we have vehicles above us at less than 8,000 feet, most of them.
Right.
They were real high. And nobody was fast. All of them were slow. And many of them just parked.
Many of them what? Say that again, Bill. Many of them were...
Many of them just parked. They stopped. And they parked there.
Wow.
And this is right in Long Beach.
This is astonishing because we've only heard, Bob, you know this, the standard story on the Battle of L.A. was that there was one craft slowly meandering its way from the Culver City, Santa Monica Mountains area, all the way down to Long Beach before it, quote, disappeared. That's all we heard.
There were 2 public releases. One of them was unclassified one, said we fired 1,432 rounds of ammunition. And then, of course, there was a top secret release that said that they recovered one craft that had been shot down and crashed in San Bernardino Mountains, and the other craft was salvaged by the Navy at sea.
Okay, hold on. I've heard rumor that one went down by Long Beach offshore and went into the water, crashed.
Correct.
I've heard another rumor that something went down in, I think it was El Monte, and a truck, a big lowboy, a flatbed truck came in, and that may have been an American fighter that was up there and got hit by our own friendly fire. I don't know. Do you know anything about that?
No, I don't know that case.
Okay.
I'm quoting from a top secret majestic document.
Oh, my. Okay. So, 2 of these, you'd think that they'd know better than to park while they're getting shot at, but 2 were shot down, or one was damaged and it crashed in the ocean. The other went down the San Bernardino Mountains. The big one we'll call that the mothership just for fun, moved off and apparently was undamaged. You can see the pictures of the Battle of Los Angeles, and you can see the exploding AA all around this thing and on it, and it wasn't damaging the big one. The smaller craft perhaps were scout craft, and they weren't so heavily able to withstand the bombardment. Now, what Bill just said is that the ships in Long Beach emptied their magazines. They had no more ammo to fire, so that would jack up the 1,700 round number to thousands.
Well, it would, and this was an Army report, so they probably didn't count the Navy rounds.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, fascinating. Okay, Bill.
It was interesting that there were several ships in the Navy dry docks in San Pedro.
Yes.
And they didn't even have most of their crews there, but the crews that were there grabbed their guns, they got their ammunition, and they're firing from ships that are in dry dock.
They're not even in the water. That's amazing.
They weren't even in the water.
That's
wow.
I didn't know that.
Wow. Now, were you, as a young man in 1942, you're in the Navy at that time, correct?
No, I was still in Vultee. This was only 2 months after the war started.
All right, that's right. Vultee. Okay, then you went in the Navy. Now, with your intuitive, unusual mind, what did you make of what you saw? A beam of light, a little pencil-thin beam of light, and went down 45 degrees and then came right over to you. Now, that's strange. That's beyond coincidental. Something was up.
Yes, but I had that kind of a problem later on in the 60s working at Douglas.
All right. Well, we'll talk about that. All right. Anything else about the Battle of Los Angeles that you want to talk about? I think 6 people died. Traffic accident, shrapnel coming down. There were a couple of heart attack reports, but it's hard to know what's real and what isn't with something that big, because this is not many weeks after Pearl Harbor, folks, and the country was scared to death at the time. All right. Anything else you want to add to that, Bill? That's a wonderful story. But the beam of light coming over and landing on you and those around you and the building and lighting up the tree, that's mind-boggling. Wow.
But I've had a light problem later on. We can talk about later if we get a chance.
All right. Well, that's an amazing thing. Okay, Vultee. Just to wrap up Vultee, what did you do at Vultee during the years you were there?
I was only there for several months.
Oh, it's months, not years. Okay.
They had this gull wing, which is like an F-4U shaped wing, but it's a much larger airplane. And had twin booms, and it was a Navy fighter. And Vultee had designed it, and they had a crash program to get it built and tested. So they had me, walk around that for the whole 3 months and make suggestions.
So you actually watched this thing, and with your eye and your intuition, we'll call it, you were able to make suggestions on design and the implementation of aerodynamics and all of that.
Well, not the aerodynamics, but I sure did do a lot of stuff on the cockpit and where they were the bomb shackles and the other things, which I knew nothing about.
All right. Well, all right. So let's move back to 1942 and then beyond, when we knew the Germans had knowledge of at least 2 extraterrestrial races, the reptilians and the Nordics. And the Germans were allied, so to speak, with the reptilians. Now, people are going to say, well, if that's the case, why didn't they come up with one of their super weapons in time to affect the outcome of the war, at least appreciably? They were for those of you who don't know, they were very close to having ground-to-air missiles, which would have knocked down enormous numbers of bombers. Air-to-air missiles. They had rockets they were firing from their planes, but they weren't guided. They had the V-1, the V-2, and then they had the big one, which could hit New York, and they were ready to test that. They may have tested it. That was von Braun and his crew. There was a lot going on. What do you know about these spies and the reptilian information that they were gathering, and how that was impacting the German weapons program?
Well, actually, the Germans knew they were going to lose the war.
By 40, they knew that by 42, yeah.
Yes, and so they had, because the reptilians have a massive cavern down on Antarctica, and there's another one next to it.
A massive cavern?
Cavern underneath the ice, underneath the ground. Okay. So the Germans then were, of course, taken down there in their meetings. They flew down in their UFOs.
So that's where the reptilians were hanging out in New Schwabenland, and that's what Admiral Byrd was sent down there with a task force in 1946 or 47, I forget. And I guess he got his clock clean down there. They
kicked him out. That was terrible. We lost that one. That was the last of the war, and we really lost that.
So did you know from inside sources how bad we got defeated down there?
Well, yes, because they were taking the Navy, Admiral Rickabotta's operatives brought back schedules for different programs. And then they were finding in 42 that groups of different types of research were gone. So they would investigate what happened to that and where did it go. And they found out that the Germans were not building just regular submarines, but they built cargo transport submarines.
Yes, they were very large,
Very large. And so what they were doing is they were building these different classes of UFOs, which were anti-gravitational propelled, in hundreds of underground manufacturing facilities using slave labor.
Yes.
So they started in 39 to take some of these facilities out of Germany down to Antarctica.
So they were actually moved. This is, all right, this whole Germans in Antarctica story is shrouded in misinformation, disinformation, speculation, but you're here to tell us that it was real, and the ET reptilians were basically headquartered down there, but they imported Germans and their technology and their building programs down there and directed them, I guess, on how to build UFOs.
Well, they actually, because they got down there way before the war was over, they were building these large 250-foot diameter UFOs with 30-man crews, and they flew to Mars. In fact, that flight was 1 week before Hitler was supposed to have been killed, and of course they didn't kill him. We've done
Harry Cooper, who runs an organization called Shark Hunters, was the first man to break the story 20 years ago that Hitler did not die in Berlin, that Bormann took he and Eva Braun out and moved them to Argentina, along with thousands of Germans, many of which we flew after the war to Argentina on DC-4 long-range transports, DC as in Douglas commercial or cargo. And we flew them down there. I knew someone who knew one of the pilots, and we transported them, and people said, well, why? Why did they let Hitler get away? Why did they let so many thousands, maybe tens of thousands, ultimately, of Germans go to Argentina? And the answer is technology. There was a trade. They traded that man's life and all the others for technology. German scientists, Kurt Diebes, von Braun, and all the rest of them. That was the answer.
Yes, it was the answer. And that same trade type of thing is where Hitler traded the use of the population here in interbreeding and many other programs for information, just like you said. But they actually flew one of the 250-foot diameter UFOs to Mars, and it had problem on the landing, and all of them got killed.
Oh.
And that flight took place 1 week before Hitler was supposed to have been taken out.
Oh, all right. The 250-foot craft departed from
Antarctica.
Okay. It was built there. I assume it would have been manned by both human and extraterrestrials.
No, it was all German.
It was all German?
Yes. Well, we had 3 Japanese fellows.
Okay. This is amazing. So down there today, right now, is there any of this still there? Do you know? Is that cavern still there? Was it sealed off? This is too big of an operation to make vanish. It would have had to have been blown up or something. What do you know about that? Anything?
Well, I would rather not speak about that.
Okay. You've just said a whole lot without saying a thing. Thank you for that. Wow. We have to pause, but I'm not going to pause. We're going to keep going here on this. So let's go ahead, Bill. What's next? For those of you listening, look up if you want. Look up Germans in Antarctica. Look up Operation High Jump, which was the name of a huge task force sent down there under the command of Admiral Byrd to neutralize this whole thing and find out what was going on. And they got their butts kicked bad. And they limped home, and it was all covered up in the media. Oh, they returned, but they didn't find anything, blah, blah, blah. Not true. There's some film on the internet, Bill, allegedly showing some of the discs down there, the disc-shaped craft, firing on the ships and so forth. I don't know if it's legitimate, but it looks it. But that's just a little sidebar.
Yeah, well, actually, that did happen. We had several hundred airplanes in that battle group, and they shot every one of them down. The UFOs came out of the ocean and just took them out one right after another. And these were some of them the real large PV-2s, flying boats, twin-engine, 4-engine.
The PBYs?
Yeah, PBYs and PB4Y2s.
And they just knocked all those down, and all the carrier-based planes, they shot them all down. All those that were launched.
The helicopter. They took every helicopter.
Wow. And where did you hear this, Bill? Can you? I don't want names, but what was your source?
Actually, I would really rather.
Okay, that's all right. I got it.
But Bill was not in the Navy at that particular time.
I understand. I hope that Dr. Bob Wood, I don't know if it's in the book, but I think Operation High Jump is certainly worthy of an extensive paper as to what Bill knows happened. It'll help fill in an awful lot of empty spaces. We were just told to get out of there, and we didn't. We went down there, and according to what we just heard, we were just destroyed. It was amazing they allowed our ships to return. I guess they wanted to, because if they had sunk all the ships, everybody would know something terrible was going on down there. So they let the ships go back. They knocked down all the fighter aircraft, helicopters, PBYs, and the others, and let the ships come back home. I think they sunk one ship. I don't remember, but
they sunk several ships.
Okay. Well, you get the picture, folks. That's wild. Now, I did ask William Tompkins The book is selected by extraterrestrials if anything was still going on down there, and he declined to answer. And I think all of you understand that we're not going to go any further with that. I think most of you understand the potential in the situation. So we'll leave it. This is a very smart audience. Thank you for sharing as much as you did. Bob, where do we go? Where would you like to go next with this story? You're the editor. Bill has an astonishing recall for detail. This is just an amazing story. Where do we go next, Bob?
Well, one of the things that Bill is particularly proud of was his influence on the Apollo program by personally meeting with von Braun and Kurt DeVos. And he had some help from one of his Nordic secretaries in strategizing that particular visit. But the ideas that he presented were fundamentally sound. In other words, it's important to keep the vehicles in the vertical position instead of having them horizontally, as the Germans used to do. And you made that recommendation, having an L-shaped building. And that was adopted, actually, by NASA. And
so that was Bill's idea, to keep the launch vehicles vertical at all times.
I don't think I'm overstating it. Is that right, Bill? Would you say that's true?
Oh, absolutely. Because we had launched, well, Bob, you know, we had Nike Zeus missiles, and we had DM-18 missiles and all kinds of stuff, and we always had trouble when they were checked out great in the horizontal. We lift them vertical, and we have problems.
That's
so
right.
For you listening, those were surface-to-air missiles, Nike Zeus, and the Ajax, I think, was the other one. Were designed...
The Ajax was first, and the Nike Hercules, and then the Nike Zeus was intended to intercept ballistic missiles from the Soviets.
Yeah, and that was from the Soviet Union. This is Cold War stuff now.
Right.
And what you just heard is when the rockets, they would all be stored horizontally, and then they would be raised 90 degrees to the vertical and launched if they needed to be. But there were troubles when they would raise them up. So Bill said, let's keep them up, and that's why they kept the Saturn V rocket and the others in a vertical position. And that's
exactly right. And he almost personally sold NASA on that concept.
Wow.
Actually, not without the approval of his management, which is part of the story that's interesting in the book. He did it single-handedly, and ultimately he got fired by inept management. But
okay. Well, that's been the curse of many otherwise talented groups of people, inept management. This book stops at what point in Bill's career?
Well, when he was at TRW, we hit a couple of highlights at TRW, and of course one of the highlights is what he can say that he saw on the occasion of the landing on the moon.
Okay, now this brings up, a lot of people listening are going to ask, why are we going with we landed on the moon when we have so much evidence that Stanley Kubrick may well have been involved in filming the landing, the Van Allen radiation belts, other problems. Let me hear Bill tell us about the Apollo program and how he is certain that it did function as we are historically led to believe. Okay, why do you think it went there when a lot of people say it couldn't? And there was so much on the line that our government decided that they were going to film it here so we could broadcast the film just in case something didn't go right up there. We could not afford to be embarrassed and lose face to the Soviet Union. So what do you have to say to those folks, and tell us more?
Well, actually, that obviously is just a political part of the program that really doesn't make anything to do with the mission. First of all, the Apollo program was the result of the NOVA program. And the NOVAs are cone-shaped vertical ships, which are about 40 times the size of an Apollo.
40?
40.
Wow.
And so these Novas were then built for trucks to haul equipment up, because phase one of Apollo was to go to the moon, get up there and then look around. Phase two was to build a 20,000-man naval base, as Bob says, on the moon, which is a research. It had all types of development of food, you name it, everything, not just a military base.
All right.
And phase three was to go to all of the habitable planets in the solar system and or their moons and put naval stations on them.
Uh-huh.
And then the last phase was to go to the 12 closest stars and do the same thing on their planets.
Well, they sure as heck weren't going to do these with Saturn V rockets. This is the other technology. Now, let me ask you another obvious question. Was the Apollo program essentially misdirection to keep people from considering the fact that we were 100 years ahead in technology and had already been to Mars, even though it crashed in 1945? Was the Apollo program necessary? Was it a misdirection like a lot of people feel the space shuttle program was?
Well, the space shuttle was only to try to cover up from everything that we got in trouble when we got to the moon. And, of course, when we got there, like Bob was saying, we had a program that we put together at TRW, and so we were able to tie into all of the missions from, in fact, it was like a small mission control, like the one in Houston. And I put that together real quick as a contractor at TRW.
You did. Okay. Now, that mission control center was not controlling Saturn rockets or the space shuttle. You were controlling other craft, correct?
No, we were paralleling the missions. So, and again, the Navy was involved with this.
All right.
Because we had military missions besides just the public Apollo mission that newspapers got.
All right.
So what we were doing is we could tie in electrically and sound-wise into the astronauts in the LEM, and we could hear everything they're saying.
Okay, so you were monitoring everything that was going on up there that the people down here might not have heard, that may have been off limits. What did the Apollo astronauts and which mission did they find that they were not alone up there?
Well, that was much earlier, because long before, 2 years before we sent the LEM up, we'd already photographed facilities on the other side of the moon. And so we knew that. And but what we didn't know was that when we got there, that we were going to be told, go ahead and finish 3 or 4 more missions, pick up your rocks, take your pictures, and get the hell out, and don't come back.
Who told us that? Wait, which group?
Reptilians.
Okay, so the reptilians again. Yeah, I've heard that, and we do have some pretty substantial data that the astronauts up there were seeing large ships parked, watching them, and so forth. And those remarks were censored by Houston. They never made it out to the public.
Well, Bill has a sketch in his book that he drew of what he saw on that occasion.
All right, we got to take a break. We'll come back and pick this up in just a couple minutes. This just some of what you can find in this extraordinary book by William Tompkins. And stay tuned. We'll be right back. Okay, and welcome back. Dr. Robert Wood and William Tompkins, whose new book, Selected by Extraterrestrials, can be purchased right now. There's an Amazon buy link under his name in the guest section of my homepage. I hope you'll pick this up. And I want to remind you there are 3 more books to come. So, wow. And it's what Bill can't talk about that is obviously of particular interest to me as a journalist and as a human being. But I get the picture, and I think I have a pretty good grasp of some things I was not quite sure about before, especially Operation High Jump. Okay, Bob Wood, where do we go? Now, I don't want to gloss over the Apollo program, and I shouldn't get into the Space Shuttle program because that was much later. I remember my dad coming back and telling me one time, he says, a big argument going on. Should we build the shuttle as a hybrid with, a rocket boosting it into orbit, or build a space plane? And he said the Germans all wanted to build a space plane, but there was more money for the industry in building the hybrid. It was ultimately, a disaster on one occasion, but tell us what you know about this, if anything, Bill, about the idea of the space shuttle program and a space plane program. They couldn't decide. They went with the cheaper version, basically.
Well, actually, let's go back again to Admiral Ricobata's people. They.
Now you have to say that again. Which people?
The in the Navy where I'm working for this Admiral Ricobata, and he has these people who are essentially spies.
Yes.
They're Navy operatives.
Yes.
And they're going over there and bringing information back, and then essentially our office then is to disseminate that data to the top people in this country.
I got you.
All the top
yeah.
scientists.
Okay. All right.
So those fellas brought back at least 30 different types of vehicles. For instance, they had just they built UFOs out of chromoly steel. They built UFOs out of wood. They built cigar-shaped vehicles. They built transports. They built construction vehicles.
Huh.
And so when you ask which of the two should be built, that really never came up because they were building everything that you could think of.
I got you. So that was kind of just a diversion. Understood.
And so when it came to the Apollo program, it was obviously not using electromagnetic gravity, but then
right.
The NASA, which really is made up of SS people, as we know, and it's not a research university type of organization.
Uh-huh.
It's a military organization.
Oh, yes.
And it's for military missions.
That's what my dad used to tell me. He said, just remember this. Every single launch is basically military. They put some public stuff in there, science, to just keep people looking the other direction. But he said it's all military.
Yeah, a great deal of misinformation to the public.
Yeah.
But the point here is that the Germans had already done this, and this young lady, the blonde, she was continued to do it, and she then was shipped down to Antarctica too, and she's still there. And,
still there right now?
Yes, and
she doesn't age. She doesn't age very fast, does she?
No, and she's a Nordic.
I was going to say she's not one of us. She's one of them. That answers that question.
Yeah, and so I want to just touch for a minute, if I could.
Yes.
On this, the two girls that we had in engineering.
Okay.
On the Apollo program.
All right. Now, where were you? This is Santa Monica.
Okay. Yeah, I'm inside a secret think tank, which is inside of engineering.
Okay.
And this secret think tank is a company that's called RAND, R-A-N-D.
Yeah.
And RAND that means research and development.
Okay.
That's where that came from.
Oh, okay. All right.
So, RAND was started by the information that I took to Douglas.
From the Navy.
From the Navy. And then, almost 10 years later, I get hired in as a draftsman in engineering at Douglas.
Uh-huh.
My boss, the engineering section chief, reads my background, and he throws me into this secret think tank.
Yeah.
And here I am carrying out the requirements that had come from the Germans in
Amazing.
the Admiral Rickerbottom's operation. So this thing is so crazy.
Yeah.
It's wild. And
no,
so
that is.
Then in that secret think tank,
Uh-huh.
I did larger versions of German transports. So I designed a 11-kilometer long German transport, like a German transport, which would be used by the United States to take people off of the planet.
What was the propulsion? This is anti-grav, electrograv, something?
Anti-gravitational.
All right. So we've had that since the 40s, basically. The
Yes.
Germans had it first. All right. Now, what about these two blonde girls?
Okay, so one day in engineering, we were working on the Apollo program,
Uh-huh.
and one of my managers said that, did you see the girl over there in propulsion? And so nobody can believe this. And there's this blonde girl that came in, and so I had already been going through three secretaries, and there's all kinds of problems with each one of them, and we ended up that all kinds of things happened to them. So one day then, of course, we were more like systems, and not just systems of RS-4B stage, which is the operating stage of the Apollo.
Yeah.
But because we found so many mistakes in the Apollo program, we then turned ourselves in engineering, in my section, because I was engineering section chief, into a systems study group of the vehicle and then the missions.
Oh.
So then I started doing missions too, which were naval missions.
Mm-hmm.
But then back to this day when this girl came in to my office and she sat down facing me on my desk. And my assistant was with me. We were talking, just having coffee, and she just walks right in. And essentially, the first thing that comes in your head is she's some sort of New York corporate executive going to buy the whole company. Or maybe she already bought the company.
Uh-huh.
I mean, that was the attitude.
Yeah.
And obviously, like what you've read before, the Nordic girls are absolutely gorgeous.
They're all 10s.
Now,
yeah.
And so I'm married to a blonde Italian girl, okay?
Uh-huh.
And she is gorgeous. But this girl comes in and proceeds to tell me how she's going to redo everything on the program. And then she, still sitting on my table in a miniskirt, and she picks up my phone and she dials a number, and she said, corporate business, I need the phone. And that attitude continued for 4 years with this girl. And she actually put stuff into my head which were the answers to the most critical problems on the Apollo program.
She was shepherding you telepathically for 4 years.
Yes. And she was brilliant. Unbelievably brilliant.
Well, was
And,
she brilliant? Was she brilliant enough to get you in bed? Never mind. That's secret.
Actually, no. But there's all kind. You had to sit in there and just listen to her dialogue.
Well, did she have an accent at all, or did she speak just perfect English?
She's right out of Hollywood Boulevard. I mean, she was gorgeous.
I got it.
And, but she was extremely sexy. She never stopped, and she made you feel so good. It was an enjoyment just to be around her.
How fascinating!
But when you read the things that she did, it's staggering, and I'm not exaggerating. And much of what I did, I got from her.
Wow. Now, did she ever... I was being facetious about the bed thing, because I know you're a very happily married man for a long time, and you wouldn't do that. That's just... people didn't do that back then. Did she ever try to force herself on you in that respect?
Never did. But she talked to other people like we were boyfriend, girlfriend.
So she was attached to you. I got it.
Yeah, and she's just a flirt, an absolute exquisite flirt. Unbelievable.
What a story.
Her uniform of the day, they came in, she and later on some other girls came in, and we started getting nothing but miniskirts. And it was a lot of fun.
Well, I'm sure. Well, it's always nice to have fun at work. Now, she clearly was a Nordic, correct?
Yes.
As you look back now. Yeah, there were two. And they don't seem to age like humans do. They maintain their looks. They're there. Did she ever say anything to you that was really unusual or suggestive of... Did she know that you knew she was a Nordic?
She always denied. They both did. They both denied that they were not. Okay, they always had excuses, and they had a father who was a banker over and so and so and all, which was all BS. But you're going to love some of the situations where we get into what you're talking about. And,
okay, all right.
You really have a ball.
It's in the book.
Yeah, this book is not only amazing; it's entertaining too.
Well, it sounds like Book of the Year, Story of the Year, certainly. Selected by Extraterrestrials, William Mills Tompkins, edited by Dr. Bob Wood. Would you gentlemen come back on the program very soon, and can we cover this book a little more?
Yeah, you should be able to get it in about 4 days, and sure, anytime. I'm here in town.
Well, we'll arrange it and have you both back. We'll do another 2-hour session. This is just amazing. Obviously, the book, whether or not people take it 100% as truth, is kind of beside the point. It's a fascinating story predicated on historical and scientific achievements right in the middle of them. And I don't know how you can lose. This you've got it all in this book. Your life has been just breathtaking. Bill, thank you very much for being here. We'll talk soon. Get you back on, and you take care of yourself.
Okay, I really appreciate you taking the time for the book, and I'm not kidding. You can have some fun reading the book. You'll enjoy it.
I hope I did you right, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I sure did.
Very good.
All right. And Dr. Bob, great to have you back again.
Thank you.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, pleasure.
Thank you, sir.
Good night.
Good night.
Yeah, good night. Have a good weekend.
You too. Okay, wow. Well, so many things. We have to pause and come back for hour 3. So we will.